Welcome to the Genealogy Professional Podcast, the resource for transitional and experienced genealogists who want to create a successful business. I'm your host, Miriam Pierre-Louis. Here you'll learn from professionals all around the world who work in the field of genealogy. Are you ready to get started? Then let's get going. Welcome to the Genealogy Professional Podcast. Today we head down under to Australia to get to know genealogist Judy Webster. Judy, welcome to the Genealogy Professional Podcast.
Hello, good morning as it is here, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you on the show. I'm so excited to be heading down under again, even though I don't actually get to go myself. So, Judy, let's get started by having you tell us about yourself and give us an overview of your genealogy business.
Well, I first became interested in family history when I was about 17, and I did it on and off just as a hobby. Then in 1986, at that stage, I was working full-time as a medical scientist and becoming a bit disenchanted with the way that job was going. And I decided to start doing research for other people. And it grew very, very slowly from there. And gradually I decreased the number of hours I was working at the hospital and increased the amount of work I was doing for research clients. There were also family influencing factors on that, like elderly parents that needed me to have more time to care for them and so on. But before I started doing research for other people, I'd spent a lot of time studying and reading and working as a volunteer in the local Family History Society, a library assistant. And that was great training to have to think about problems that I'd never faced in my own research. As time went on, my genealogy business changed a little bit. My speciality is research at Queensland State Archives, which is a fairly specific area. But gradually I also expanded from not just doing research for clients there, but also indexing their original records and putting the names from those indexes on my website and then offering a copying service with the original records, if that makes sense.
Let's go back to where you said medical scientist. What exactly do you do as a medical scientist, or what did you do as a medical scientist?
I worked in a pathology department in a large hospital and was doing blood tests. And in a large hospital like that, the pathology department's divided into a number of different sections, and I was specifically in the hematology and blood transfusion medicine section. So we were doing tests for anemia and other problems, and also preparing blood transfusions and other products for transfusion.
So back at this time, did you know Helen Smith, either because of her medical profession or because you happened to bump into her? She might not even be in your part of Australia, I don't know.
Oh yes, Helen and I have been friends for many years. We did actually meet through family history. I think we met at a seminar. Neither of us can quite place exactly when and where it was, but we did meet through family history and not through the medical scientist aspect.
So while you are transitioning from science over to full-time professional genealogy, at what point did you know that you could take the plunge and do genealogy full-time?
The day I got so fed up with the hospital job that I thought I couldn't do it anymore.
So that's interesting. But I'm sure you had a certain amount of clients under your belt, a certain financial comfort level before you were willing to just, storm off, so to speak.
I have never really been a full-time genealogist. I mean, I have never made a living from it full-time. And I don't believe that it's very easy to do that without some other string to your bow. I can't actually say I mean, 1986 is a long time ago, and that's when I started having my first clients. I think I started out very small, and somebody who was living in the country met me at a genealogy event and asked whether I'd do research, and I agreed. And that was actually an outstanding success and gave me a lot of confidence because I was asked to find out what happened to somebody whose name was John Smith. And I thought that was going to be impossible, but I actually succeeded. And it took me into using a lot of records that I'd never used before. And that was a huge confidence boost. And then gradually word of mouth referrals brought me more and more clients.
What is the genealogy landscape like in Australia? Here in the United States, it's really popular. There's always kind of a strong demand for help with genealogy. A lot of people come into the idea of wanting to learn their family history. Every year there's new people, especially with all these television shows. What was it like in Australia, especially in 1986, in terms of Australians' desire to learn about their family history? And how has that changed to today? Is there a stronger desire today to learn about it, or has it remained the same?
It has changed very much, and that's because of the internet. There were, and there still are, a lot of people wanting to research their family history, and the shows on TV stimulate that interest. Unfortunately, the fact that we've got some shows on TV, some advertisements on TV making it look as though it's very easy, people that are coming into it now have a very false expectation of what they can achieve with what amount of effort. And they also think they can do everything themselves online. And this is having a big impact not only on people like me who are looking for clients to boost their business, but also for the archives and libraries. We've already had the National Archives office in Brisbane, the local office here, closed 2 days a week because they weren't getting enough people using the search room. And it's likely to happen in the state archives here too, just because people aren't coming in to use the original records the way they did. Is that something that's happening in America as well?
We are seeing pressure on archives and places like that for sure. And there definitely is that expectation of all these new people who are diving into their family history for the first time. The television programs make it look very easy, and they think they can do it all online.
I don't know how we overcome that. I mean, even all the family history societies are struggling really to keep members. They've got to change their focus. So it's a problem, and I don't quite know what the solution is, except for those of us that have been around a long time, to try and educate people that the vast majority of the original records and some of the very best original records are never, ever going to be online.
So tell us a little bit about the Queensland State Archives. You said you specialized in that. Tell us some of the things that people might find there that they're not going to find online.
Queensland State Archives, as the name suggests, are the state government archives. Now, in Australia, most of our records are based on the state and territory divisions. There are some things that are centralised. Certain things are in the National Archives, so that's federal government responsibility. Those records will now be in the National Archives. But the state archives cover court records, prison records, land records, hospital records. The ones I'm rattling off here are the ones that I'm particularly fond of using, I guess. Did I say electoral rolls? That's another interesting thing in Queensland, where we have the state electoral roll separate from the federal Commonwealth electoral rolls, and the state rolls are more useful. But that's a whole separate story. Just about anything that the state government is involved with, those records will be in the archives here. It's just mind-boggling what's there. And I'm still learning. After 30 years, I'm still learning.
I've got two questions about those records. First off, the hospital records. Do you have any privacy laws in Australia that prevent people from viewing hospital records? I'm surprised you mentioned that. In the United States, we've got all these laws that prevent people from accessing records like that.
Oh yes, indeed we do. And the Privacy Act has caused all sorts of havoc with research because they've changed the access restrictions on a lot of records in the last 5 or 10 years. The hospital records are now closed for 100 years from the date that they were created. But that still means that we've got access to some very brilliant records. Hospital records are a bit of a passion of mine. I've been indexing any of the 19th century ones in particular that are accessible at Queensland State Archives, and there aren't a lot, but what's there is absolutely brilliant for family history. They were originally only closed for 65 years, and then they changed it to 100. Mental asylum records also, it depends on what type of records they are. Most of those are closed for 100 years, but in practice it's difficult to get even the more recent ones. Other records, a lot of them are closed. For example, some of the police and prison records would probably be closed for about 65 years. Some of them might be 70 or 75. Some of the court records are closed for 80 years. For example, the records to do with maintenance payments for deserted wives and deserted children. A lot of those closed for 80 years.
Can you tell us why prison records are so important to Australia? I believe there's a different connotation associated with prison records in Australia than there is in the United States.
I'm not sure about that, but certainly here, they're very useful for family history research. You're probably thinking of the convict aspect of Australia, are you?
Yeah, I'm thinking about your early history.
Yes, the early history. Those early convict records is not something I'm expert in because I don't think I have any convict ancestors. Because it was so much a part of why Australia was developing, then those records were kept fairly well, and they are very, very useful. Prison records that I'm generally dealing with here are just everyday prison records for ordinary people going to prison for sometimes minor things and sometimes, of course, very major things. One of the important aspects of the prison records for a family history point of view is the fact that they often show the ship of arrival, which can be quite difficult. Immigration records into Australia are a bit hit and miss. There's some brilliant ones, but there's also a lot of ships where the passenger list is just a few people that came out in the upper classes, and then it'll say 350 steerage passengers, no names. And so they may not be recorded anywhere in Australia's immigration records. But the prison records often will give the name of the ship and what year the person arrived.
Well, that's very interesting. I would never have thought to look in prison records for an immigration ship name. That's pretty cool.
Hospital records too.
Really?
The printed hospital records frequently have the space for ship of arrival filled in. Some of the spellings are a little challenging because they were often written down as they sounded, and it might take you a little while to actually find a ship that might fit what's written there.
Now, another thing that you do, which you mentioned, was the indexing for clients. And you mentioned that you did some indexing of records in the Queensland State Archives. What exactly are you indexing for clients? Are you indexing books that they wrote, or are they hiring you to go into the state archives to index records for them?
Two different types of indexing I have done. For quite a number of years, when the state archives had a little bit of extra funding at the end of the year to spend on whatever they wanted, they employed a few people, including myself, to index some of the original records there, so that they could put those indexes out to the public and put them on their website. So I have been involved in a lot of the indexes that are on the Queensland State Archives website as a part-time employee of the archives. But what I've been doing myself, I choose a record set that I think is going to be very useful for family historians, and then I create a name index to it. then I put the names on my website and offer a copying service. Some of those indexes I've also published in book form.
Okay, well, that helps clarify it a lot. So you're not actually indexing books for clients. That's a sort of different kind of service.
It is, yes. I've never done any book indexing. I think that's quite specialised field.
And what about your other publications? Because I noticed on your website you have quite a few publications listed.
Yes, the main one would be Tips for Queensland Research, which has had a number of editions over the years. And in fact, I'm preparing a new edition at the moment, which hopefully might be finished by the end of this year, if I get enough spare time. The other book was Specialist Indexes in Australia, a Genealogist's Guide. And that is essentially an index of indexes. People told me what records they were indexing, and I put those details in the book. It's essentially just a big finding aid, an index of indexes. And although that's somewhat out of date now, a lot of the information in that is still relevant. And those books are in a lot of the family history libraries and state libraries.
So when you started your business, when you turned your back on medicine, what were some of the skills that you lacked? Because it's a different thing taking clients and working for other people as an independent business, not being an employee. What were some of the things you had to come up to speed on really quickly?
Time management was and still is to some extent something that I struggle with, trying to balance how much work I accept, realistically how much I can get done, and still allowing for family disruptions. You know, as I said, I was a carer for both of my parents at various times in their lifetime, and it was hard to manage my workload and still be there for the family when they needed me. My accounting skills were essentially zero, but my business is fairly straightforward, and so once I started using accounting software, that wasn't really an issue. I create my web pages myself, and so I wanted to have complete control over my website, what I put there, when I changed it, and I wanted the cost of that to be predictable. I figured the only way to do that was to teach myself to write HTML code, which I did very, very slowly. So I write all my web pages from just in a text editor. So they're not fancy, they're not particularly pretty, they're just basic, but the information is there. And it means I can change it whenever I want. Midnight in my pajamas, if I suddenly think of something that needs adding or needs improving, I can do it then and there. That was a skill that I didn't have, that I taught myself, and which has made a huge, huge difference to my business, because now 99.9% of my work comes via my website. Oh, some comes word of mouth referrals too, but most people will go to my website before they contact me.
How often do you update your website?
Oh, it's very erratic. There's about 130 pages on my website. For example, just recently I heard that some more police watchhouse records had suddenly been deposited at the archives. And so I added that to the list on the web page. So some pages get changed just when something happens, which might not be very often at all. And some get updated much more often. I do have one web page where I list special discount offers. So if I hear that Find My Past's having a free weekend or 50% off, or Ancestry's Australian records are free this weekend or whatever, then I tend to put it on that page. Some other pages I add names to. Some of my indexing projects are finished now, but some of them are very much an ongoing project. And so I might add batches of names to that. Sometimes I might do it a couple of times a month. Sometimes 6 months might go by before I've actually made any further progress with that index. That all sounds very confusing, but do you know what I mean?
Yes, and you have something wonderful on your website. I've never seen this before, not on a genealogy website anyways, and I really like this. So you have this page called What's New, which is kind of like a chronological log of what you've updated on your website. And it's so cool because I can see the last thing you did was May 25th, 2016, and I can scroll down and see all the things that you have updated going backwards in
Oh,
time. I love it.
oh, great. Oh, good. Thank you. I'm glad you like that. I tend to put the main things on there. Some of the other pages that might change a little bit more unpredictably or minor changes perhaps, I tend not to put that on the What's New page. On those pages where I think changes will be of interest to people that might regularly visit the page, I have a change detection bar. Are you familiar with changedetection.com?
No, tell me about it.
It's a free website. You just create a login and then you can monitor a particular web page, a particular URL, and then you will receive an email when the page changes. And you have some control over how often you get those emails, whether you get them daily or weekly or monthly. And you can say, I only want an email if text is added or if text is deleted. For some websites, it doesn't work very well because it picks up fairly minor changes that really aren't of interest. With my web pages, it works fine because I code the HTML for my pages so that it will only trigger that changedetection.com alert if there is something that people really need to know. If I just simply change the way a paragraph is worded, but it doesn't change the content in any significant way, then I don't trigger the change detection alert. So anybody can click that little bar marked receive email if this page changes or receive email if more names are added to this list. You can click that with confidence and know you're not going to be bombarded with emails only when something you really want to know will happen.
So how did you learn to code it that way so that it would only trigger changedetection.com when there was something significant? Did they have that available on their website? How did you learn how to do that?
Yes, on the changedetection.com website, there is a section there for webmasters, and it does tell you there what line of code you need to use.
That's so cool. I'm going to have to check that out. That's one of the best tips I've gotten lately. That's wonderful. Even though you're in Australia, you have gotten a reputation around the world. People know you outside of Australia. That's a fair statement, right?
I guess so. It always surprises me when somebody says that, but yes, I guess so, because of my website.
Not only because of your website, but because of your strong involvement with an organization called Kiva. And you, I believe, are the one who started is it Kiva for Genealogists movement?
It's a Kiva team that's called Genealogists for Families. The background to that is that, well, it all started with my dad, really. For most of his life, my dad set aside a sum of money that he would lend to people who just needed a helping hand. People he knew, and he would lend them the money and they would pay it back. And this went on many, many, many times. My sisters and I grew up thinking that was normal, that everybody did that. Dad didn't even tell his own brothers and sisters that he was doing it. He was an amazing, generous, quiet man that did a lot for people in a very, very quiet way. And when he died, we wanted to carry on this tradition of his of lending money to people who just needed a helping hand, not a handout. It took me a couple of years to find a way to do that. And then Carol Riley, a genealogist in New South Wales here in Australia, she mentioned that she'd belonged to this organisation, Kiva. And I looked into it and I thought, that's perfect. We can lend money, we can choose who we lend it to. As the money is repaid, we can lend it to somebody else. So I set up the lending team, and Carol Riley also gets the credit for naming it Genealogists for Families. That was her idea. For anyone that's not familiar with Kiva, it's a non-profit organisation that works with microfinance institutions. And you choose a borrower to support. There's pictures and little potted biographies and a little description of their business on the Kiva website. You make a loan with $25, and all the information you need is there. It tells you what the risk rating is for that particular organisation or individual. And it tells you when the money will be repaid. Will it be repaid monthly over 12 months or at the end of 18-month term or whatever? And so you can really assess what you want to support, what small family business or individual entrepreneur you want to support with your $25. And then you watch the money be repaid and then you choose somebody else. And it's heaps and heaps of fun choosing who you're going to support. I love a repayment day. It's loads of fun. With a small amount of money, even if you only invest $25 and let that same $25 be recycled over and over and over again, at the end of a couple of years, you look at your portfolio and you can see what a huge difference that small sum of money has made to so many people. I really believe in it. It's just wonderful.
For everyone who's listening, the website is Kiva, Kiva.org. And I'm looking, I went in to the website and I chose women because there are like different options that you can choose to see who you can lend money to. It's amazing. There are women from all around the world, all continents. So I didn't realize just how broad it was spread. So there's Peru and Mexico and Senegal and Kyrgyzstan and the United States as well. There are Americans in here getting small loans. I don't see any Australians yet, but they might be here as well. But all over the world. Amazing.
Australia isn't in it, but some of our near neighbours are. Samoa, Fiji, some of those countries on the list now.
Yeah, that's kind of fun. How many genealogists are part of this group?
Yesterday when I checked, there were 316.
Wow. Do you have an idea of where those genealogists come from? Are they mostly Australian? Or are they from Europe or America? Or where are they from?
No, they're from all over. I think there's about 9 or 10 different countries. There's quite a lot in America, Canada, the UK, the Netherlands, Denmark, New Zealand, of course, our near neighbours, and a smattering of others, I think, but those would be the main ones.
Oh, it's a fascinating thing. I think I'm going to have to jump on board the Kiva thing. So say I wanted to join your Kiva group, what would I have to do?
I guess contrary to what it probably says on some of the web pages, what I would suggest you do is go to the Kiva.org, join Kiva first. That's the first step. Then search for the team called Genealogists for Families. Join that team and then make a loan. Then when you make your first Kiva loan, you assign that loan to the Genealogists for Families group. That means you've still got control of the money. It just makes the group's portfolio look more impressive, essentially. The money's all yours. The payments go back to you, but you just choose to assign it to the team to boost the team's statistics, essentially. To make your loan, you just got to do it through PayPal, so that's very easy.
Okay, so the key thing is to go to the site and get an account first and then search for the group.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, great. I'm going to have a little fun with that later, I think.
We have our own blog, although I haven't had time to write in it much lately. But if you went to Gen Families, GenFamilies.blogspot.com, most of the information that you need would be in there, including how to join, with a link to that Kiva and a link to the group.
Judy, what's the most fun project that you've ever worked on that you can share with us?
Some of the research that I've done involving court records has been fairly exciting because what I was finding was unexpected. The records were new to me and very interesting. There was one where I was asked to find out why this person changed his name. And the court records came up with the most fascinating story. It was all to do with guardianship. Those were the court records that I found. And it gave a big background across 3 countries of the extended family, their movements, their problems, and why this relative was applying for guardianship of the child and the subsequent change of name. It was just so unexpected to find all that in this particular source. That was really exciting. I was just as excited as the client was. That was a really good one.
All right, Judy, we are going to pick up the tempo now because we are about to enter the lightning round.
Right.
All right, brace yourself. Here we go. What was the one thing you were most afraid of in starting your business?
That there actually wouldn't be enough demand for a specialised field. Queensland State Archives alone, I was afraid that there wouldn't be enough people wanting research done there only.
What's the best advice you've ever received from someone else?
A friend told me that every time I go into the archives, if I am waiting for records to be delivered to my desk, go to one of their finding aids, their card catalogues, their online catalogue or whatever, pick something that I have never heard of and never seen and order it and have a look to see what's in it.
That's great advice. I love that.
That has led me into so many interesting indexing projects, and a lot of the things you see on my website are as a result of that piece of advice.
Oh, I love it. Nobody's ever said anything like that before, and it's really good.
Good.
What is one specific action listeners can take in the next 24 hours to help them transition into a genealogy career?
Find out more about the archives where you plan to do a lot of research. Really, really get to know it well. Read all the brief guides. Make sure you really understand the potential of your record office and grow yourself and learn how to use it better. You can do some of that online before you even get into the record office.
What is your preferred social media channel to communicate with your clients or your customers, or to find customers?
Well, I rely very heavily on my own website. Most people find me that way just through Google searches or whatever. I do use Facebook. I have a Facebook page for genealogy. I use Twitter intermittently. I don't actually communicate a lot with clients via social media. I use email. It's something else I didn't mention, which people consider me a little odd, is that I do not use the telephone to communicate with clients. I use email only.
And do you tell your clients that
Yes.
At the beginning, that you don't take calls?
Yes, I do. It was all a family matter when I was caring for elderly relatives and just couldn't be interrupted at any time. They were ill, sleep, whatever. I just couldn't have phone calls. And it doesn't seem to be a problem as long as I monitor my email fairly often.
If you can recommend one book for our listeners, what would it be?
This is probably a bit too Australian to be widely relevant, but I'm sure other countries will have something similar. It's a book called Weevils in the Flower, and it's an oral history of the Great Depression in Australia. But I dare say there will be other books elsewhere that deal with other countries. It makes you very aware of social circumstances and economic circumstances and the impact that can have on a family and how that can affect the way we need to research, apart from being a very good read in its own right.
Give our audience one parting piece of advice and then tell us how we can get in contact with you.
My main piece of advice would be always research the relatives. The information that you need is nearly always going to be found in the records of the subject's siblings or cousins or their descendants. It's absolutely vital to research the relatives thoroughly. How to contact me? The best way is through my website, www.judywebster.com.au. And on that, the navigation bar near the top of that page, there is About. Click on that link. That will always have my current email and postal addresses, even though they are subject to change. That's the best way to contact me. Look for the details on that page.
Judy Webster, thank you so much for being on the Genealogy Professional Podcast today.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely talking to you. I've read so much of yours online, and it's been lovely to actually talk to you.
What a great chat with Australian genealogist Judy Webster. We had the opportunity to learn about Queensland records, in particular hospital and prison records. We also learned that Judy feels passionate about a topic close to many genealogists' hearts, the presumption that all research can be done online. We also touched on some more unusual topics, such as the website changedetection.com and the nonprofit organization Kiva.org. I have to mention that after speaking with Judy about Kiva, I joined their Kiva lending team, Genealogists for Families, and I've already made my first microloan to a small businesswoman in the country of Haiti. And finally, Judy shared that one of her big issues is time management, and I think nearly all of us can relate to that. In genealogy business news, the Association of Professional Genealogists is looking for a managing editor for the APG Quarterly Magazine, otherwise known as the APGQ. So check out the publications page on www.apgen.org for more information about the magazine itself, and interested parties can send cover letters and resumes to admin@apgen.org by July 10th, 2016. In other APG news, the annual Professional Management Conference early bird deadline is coming up on July 15th, and again, that's 2016. Be sure to register by then so that you can save money off the registration price. Here are just a few of the excellent speakers that will be presenting. Dr. Thomas W. Jones, Mary Penner, Bethany Waterbury, Dr. Michael Lacopo, Melanie Holtz, Michael Haight, Catherine Damaris, Billy Fogarty, and many others. Of course, I'll be there. I'm just excited because I'll finally get to meet a bunch of these people for the first time in person. And that could be you too. I can meet you in person as well. I really cannot wait to attend. It's going to be one of the few times of the year that I actually get out and get to meet other genealogists. Our friends over at AHA Seminars have announced a new podcast called Genealogy Connection, hosted by Drew Smith. Genealogy Connection will present interviews with genealogical speakers, authors, librarians and archivists, database service providers, software and technology developers, and other leaders in the community. The first episode debuts on June 27, 2016. Genealogy Connection will use the same feed as the Genealogy Guys. So if you're already subscribed to that, you will automatically get the episodes, which will run in alternating weeks from the Genealogy Guys episodes. So congratulations to Drew on that new project. And lastly, I want to mention a new Facebook group of genealogy business people called the Genealogy Business Alliance. This group is primarily for businesses that exhibit in the vendor halls at genealogy conferences. They are working on developing best practices that will meet the needs of both exhibitors and conference organizers. If that is of interest to you, search for Genealogy Business Alliance on Facebook. Before we end, I have to leave you with an action item. This was a really easy one to create. Judy mentioned that she was concerned that people don't realize how much information is available in archives that isn't online. And she's absolutely right. If we all do this action, we can start to make a dent in the misperception that all research can be done online. This action has two parts. Part one, analyze your local archive and discover which materials they have that are not online. And hey, that's kind of fun. It's a field trip. Go to your local archive. And hopefully you've already done this. If this is a place where you're doing research regularly, you should really be doing that exercise like they do in the ProGen class, which is that research guidance exercise where you make your own research guide about the archive so that you know what kind of materials are there. So you can combine that sort of with that exercise if you haven't done that already. But make a list, not to get you confused, make a list of what they have that's not online. That could be nearly everything, or maybe it could be just a few select collections. But figure out the difference between what they have that's already covered by an online database and what they have that hasn't been touched and put online. And then part two, and you got to do part two to make this a really valuable effort. Make a list on a page of your website or blog listing all the resources from that archive that are not available online so that the general public can have access to it, because knowledge is power. And if they find something on your webpage and they realize that it's not available online because you wrote about it, then they're going to make use of that archive. This is going to benefit you because it shows you're an expert. It's going to benefit the archive because now people are going to start to go using those resources. And if we all do this exercise locally in our own area, then collectively we're benefiting everyone across the world, but locally we're having a strong impact so that our local archives get used. Of course, you don't have to list everything in your local archive that isn't online. You might just provide broad categories. If it's one of those places that doesn't have a lot that's been published or digitized, you can just do broad overviews of what's available. If you're at a loss as to where to start, have a chat with the folks at your local archive and ask them. Tell them what you want to write about and that you want to find things that aren't online. And I'm sure that they would be happy to point you to those collections. So not only will you be helping the general public learn about more of the resources at that archive, but even better, you'll be on your way to developing a working relationship with the staff. So all around, this exercise just has so many good points beyond the actual point of the exercise. So I really hope that you will do this. It really shouldn't take you that long. I'm not asking you to write a book. For those of you who need limits in order to get motivated, keep it down, keep it a page. No more than a page. There, I've told you, don't write more than a page. If you want to write a book, go ahead. But you need to do this by the time, you need to complete this by the time the next episode comes out. So that will encourage you just to write a page. And then after you complete that page, then you can think about writing your book. But just remember, done is better than perfect. So just get it done. All right, that's it for this time. Until we meet again, keep improving your business skills and take at least one step to push your business forward. The Genealogy Professional Podcast is a production of Fieldstone Common Media, copyright 2016. Executive producer, Miriam Pierre-Louis. Creative producer, George Edwards. Production assistant, Pam Wolos. Technical director, Jean-Luc Pierre-Louis Jr.